are 5 thinking habits that are easy to do. You can start using these straight away that will make you sound smarter. And as a bonus, when you keep using these and they do actually become habits, genuinely make you smarter. Here's the first thinking habit. Start at the end. I have worked with some brilliant researchers and academics who are world-leading experts in their field, but they are so confusing to listen to. And part of that is that they are working through this chain of reasoning. You ask them for their opinion, and they're starting with,
well, you could think about it from this angle, and then that would lead you to this conclusion, but then once you introduce this factor, it combines together to create this thing, but then in this kind of context, it becomes more complicated, and therefore, here's my opinion on it.
And you've already lost track of what they're trying to say, like 5 minutes in. You don't even understand their conclusion anymore. And it's the same about judgments that people make of you. It's not about the thoughts that you have on the inside, but how you present them that actually matters. And so if you're communicating something that is, you think it's brilliant, but they're struggling to follow along, they're gonna make the judgment that your quality of thinking is not very good. But the quality of your thinking may be very good. You're just not very good at making your thinking legible for other people to follow. It's really hard to keep hold of multiple points and concepts simultaneously and piece it together in an easy way. And instead, it feels a lot smarter when you start with the end. What's the conclusion? And then go back to your rationale. When you start at the conclusion and you just say, this is what I think, here's why I think it. It frames the issue for the person. They know how to think about it. And the good thing about this when it becomes a habit is that sometimes we have a tendency to just start speaking or giving an opinion about something when we actually don't really know where it's heading. But once we start explaining it, we realize we don't really know this as deeply as we thought we did. This in the literature is called the illusion of explanatory depth. It basically says that there are moments when we think we know something really well, and we only realize we don't know it when we start trying to explain it step by step. Smart people are aware, they're cautious of this illusion. And so by forcing yourself and asking, what is my conclusion about this? It helps you to quickly examine your reasoning and your rationale to look for these little gaps. And even if you find these gaps, you can still start with your conclusion. It's just that your conclusion carries more nuance and uncertainty. So for example, instead of saying, I think we should do something in this way, the conclusion, the end that we start with might be, I feel like we should do it this way, but I'm uncertain about a few points here. Here's what I'm seeing so far. And then you list out your reasons and your considerations. You can see it's still just as easy to follow, but it also isn't coming across as overconfident or glossing over issues that you need some more time to think through. Habit number 2, separate your observations from your conclusions. This is a personal pet peeve of mine. Let's say I'm running a workshop, and then afterwards, a member of my team comes up to me and they say, hey, Justin, look, we really need to talk about the workshop that you just ran. It really wasn't good. There were a lot of issues there. I think we need to work on some improvements. And I say, what are you talking about? What went wrong? And they say, oh, well, when you delivered this slide, it wasn't this good. And when you asked this question, I think you should have worded it in this way. And instead of this activity, maybe you should do this activity instead. Now, on the surface, it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with that. It seems like constructive, valuable feedback from a trusted member of the team. But in my mind, and in the mind of the listener that receives that, there are some seeds of doubt. And the doubt is, how did you come to that conclusion in the first place? How did you conclude that fixing this slide or changing this activity to another one is going to be the right solution to make this better? What is much more valuable, generates more trust and transparency, is when you actually state the observations before arriving at your conclusions. So instead of starting with, hey, this workshop was terrible, this is what you need to fix, it would be, hey, when you did this activity, I noticed the expressions of the people in the crowd were becoming a little bit more disengaged, they were yawning, they seemed a little bit more confused. When you were asking questions, people weren't really putting their hands up and responding to you. And so as a result of those observations, I think there are these things that can be improved. And I think this is a really valuable habit for a number of reasons. First of all, it gets buy-in. When you lay the observations out there on the table and we're all looking at it, especially in a situation where you're giving feedback to someone, it's a much more us versus the issues situation rather than a me versus you issue. And number two, as part of that process, all the relevant people can come to their own conclusions about it. And then you can have a really valuable discussion about the way that you're interpreting these observations. This is much more productive than having a conversation about the conclusions themselves. Because once you have a locked-in conclusion that is your opinion or belief, you're just having an argument of opinion versus opinion. And third, it is a sign of intelligence when you recognize that your conclusions may be flawed or biased. People who are superficial, shallow thinkers, they are also highly confident. They have opinions and conclusions and they swear they're right. And the thing about a bias is that all humans are affected by it. And so by making it a habit to separate out what your observations are from the conclusions you're forming, it also forces you to challenge your own assumptions and biases. And this cognitive flexibility is a hallmark sign of intelligence. Now, by the way, I am only covering in this video 5 thinking habits, but there are obviously many more thinking habits that are valuable. So if you are interested in learning more, then a good place that you can check out is my free weekly newsletter. These are relatively short newsletters that I type up myself personally. They take about 3 to 5 minutes to read, and they go through habits like this: principles, insights, perspectives, frameworks that you can start using immediately. At the end of every newsletter is a practical takeaway so that you have a focus for each week. I'll leave a link in the description for you to join. I also know that some of you have realized that the newsletters were on a pause for a period of time, but don't worry, they are going to be coming back. I just had to spend a bit of time to rest, frankly, but also getting feedback from you guys to make sure that the newsletters really are valuable for you. So anyway, newsletters are going to be coming back in full force. With that being said, let's move on to the next thinking habit. All right, habit number 3, clarify the question. I love doing this in meetings or in conversations with people because I think it provides so much value. I love when people do this to me when they're the one clarifying my question. What this means is when someone asks you a question, asks for your opinion or your input or to start some kind of project, you start by saying, okay, so what you're really asking of me is to do this. Or I feel like there are 2 parts to this question. There's this part and this part. Let's tackle them separately. Mentally, you're asking yourself, what is the crux of this question or problem? What is truly the issue we're trying to solve? What is truly the concern that we have? What is the purpose of this person's ask of me? And the reason I find this so valuable is that this is an action that not only, first of all, actually just buys you time to think about things while also sounding intelligent, but it also actively helps to sharpen and organize your thinking. It forces you to think a little bit more critically and deeper about the essence of what this person is trying to communicate. And when you play it back to them, it exposes gaps in your own understanding. That's a valuable conversation to have. What I often find is that that activity helps to sharpen the other person's thinking as well. When you say, hey, I know that you're asking me to do this thing, but it actually seems like really there are 2 parts of this that need to be dealt with separately. Is that right in my understanding? And the person that hears that is now thinking, yeah, actually that's a good point. Yeah, they are actually 2 separate things. And now that you mention it, there's a 3rd thing in there as well. This person is having interesting, meaningful thoughts. Their own understanding of the issue is actually becoming more organized and deeper because of your question. And remember what I said, people are forming a judgment about you based on how they feel and think interacting with you. When interacting with you, if they feel that interesting, deeper, clearer thoughts are being triggered, they're gonna think that you are a smarter, more organized person. And again, most high quality thinkers are thinking through this already, but they're not presenting it and communicating it back. And the risk here is that when they don't make that explicit, they'll go on working with these assumptions. And when they present it to the person, it's like, hey, this is not what I asked for, because there wasn't that clarity to begin with. Habit number 4, state the antithesis. This is especially valuable if you're in a position of leadership or decision making. And by the way, I know that the word is actually pronounced antithesis, but I'm pronouncing it antithesis to really emphasize the nature of the word. A hypothesis is what you think is going to happen. The antithesis is the counter-argument, swinging it the other way. And then you arrive in the middle, which is your thesis. Stating the antithesis is about saying, I think we should do this. However, Here are the arguments that would change that decision. We should launch this product 2 months from now, but here are the 3 conditions that would delay that timeline. Thoughtful people already think about these counter-arguments, the antitheses. But again, they don't necessarily make it explicit, and they don't always do it consistently. But when you actively think about this, and then you communicate it, it signals to the person that's listening that this is someone who actually thinks deeply about it, and that this is someone who has that cognitive flexibility. Remember, I said that superficial thinkers tend to think in a very rigid way. They have thoughts and conclusions and they lock them in. They don't really challenge them. And so by stating your own counter-arguments up front, it demonstrates, hey, not only have I thought about this, I've also thought about some of the hypotheticals that would change my argument. And I'm not willing to defend my decision beyond the point of reasonable evidence. That is exactly the type of decision maker or leader that you tend to trust more. And I think this is a fantastic habit to internalize that actually makes you genuinely smarter, because especially when you have lots of experience and expertise, and then when you're making judgments quickly and you're really busy, you're under time pressure, there is a tendency to fall back on a more passive pattern recognition. Oh yeah, we should do it this way because that's the way that I've always done it. We take these cognitive shortcuts to save energy and time. And most of the time, it's okay. But by actively checking, it acts as a cognitive checklist. After all, maybe this time is a little different from all the other times. And the 5th thinking habit is to keep it concise. When I was working as a medical doctor, actually when I was still a medical student, I remember getting advice from one of my seniors who's told me every word that comes out of your mouth should be a golden pearl. The idea was that I kind of rambled on a little bit too much when I asked questions and took histories from my patients. Now, the doctor that gave me that advice actually ended up going to prison eventually, which is a completely separate story, which, remind me to cover that one day. But the advice, I think, the feedback is still valid. Deep thinkers have lots of thoughts, and they like to elaborate on those thoughts. But elaborating on all of your thoughts doesn't sound smart. It's very confusing to follow. It makes you seem like a disorganized, messy thinker. And often when deep thinkers allow themselves to just elaborate endlessly, it actually stops them from reaching what I believe is an even deeper level of thinking. The act of making something concise and really being ruthless about understanding what is and is not necessary to think about or communicate requires the deepest level of expertise. This is the whole basis for the Feynman method, where you teach something to a 10-year-old. And so even if you have a complex opinion that you need to communicate, get into the habit of compressing it down first. Figure out the 1 or 2 liner that communicates all the important points without any of the fluff. And honestly, this is one of the main things I try to focus on every single time I do a YouTube video or make an Instagram reel. It is a skill I have been trying to work on for years now, and I still feel that I have so much longer to go, but I can truly see the impact. Not only does it make my thinking much more organized and to the point, but I can also see in the comments that you guys leave in the videos, from feedback from my team, that the way that I communicate, how easy it is to understand it, is improving. So those are the 5 thinking habits that hopefully will get you the recognition that you deserve and actually make you even smarter over time. Now, if you're looking for a way to actually get even sharper with your thinking and be able to organize and create clarity while working with uncertainty and complexity, then I'd strongly recommend checking out this video here, where I talk about the concept of thinking on paper. It is one of the most valuable skills that you can learn to increase the clarity of your thinking. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.